Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Full Swing Thoughts, a fried egg podcast on the Netflix docuseries Full Swing. Includes Andy Johnson, Brendan Porath of the Fried Egg and Shotgun Start, and Fried Egg contributor, all-around golf smart guy, Joseph LaMagna. Today we're going to take on, or this episode we're going to take on episode 4 of the docuseries. It's titled Imposter Syndrome. It is largely about Joel Dahmen, affectionately known as Jolie D in these parts. It covers the scenes of Torrey Pines, sectionals for US Open. I think it's our first real taste of the US Open footage, right? Brookline, Country Club at Brookline. Scenes from Damon's house, from his caddy Gino Bonelli's home and hometown. And sort of the arc of the mid-tier. Is that underselling Joel Dahmen's position in the game? Mid-tier PGA Tour pro. That is the primary focus of this episode. Is that accurate? Joseph? You looked dubious.
No, I think that is accurate.
Okay.
I think it's also a testament to how good
Yeah.
the mid-tier is on the PGA Tour and how competitive it is, because Joel Dahmen is a really good golfer. So right. He has a quote, somebody's got to be the 70th best player in the world, and I'm sure we'll get to that and many other quotes, but it's really hard to be the 70th best player in the world, and when you're on, you can be one of the best.
Right. Andy, what'd you make of this episode? What'd you think of this?
I think the opening scene doing the Scottsdale thing was a perfect way to hook you in and get people really interested in a player like that's not a superstar. I think that's one of the tough aspects of golf is how do you get somebody to care about somebody that's like Brendan Todd. But Joel Dahmen obviously has the personality of a personality, like top 10 personality on tour in a mid-tier tour player mold of a golfer. So I think that worked really well. The selection, if you're going to profile a mid-tier tour player, as you affectionately called him, I think that having that big personality, that likable personality, that alone makes this a compelling episode was the big thing. And being able to hook people in with that start, that Scottsdale National scene with Harry Higgs was a great way. And
TPC Scottsdale.
Scottsdale.
Same
Sorry.
Yep. The Phoenix Open, where they take their shirts off as the beer rains down.
I really loved this episode. I thought it hit on a lot of things beyond the mid-tier tour pro. I thought the most powerful thing was the caddy player relationship and going into detail about that relationship. And it's something unique about golf, right? Is the caddy player relationship. And I thought that this relationship of all of them was a wonderful one to highlight. I can't help, like, we talk about how you want these shows to make you feel something, right? And you want to glean insight. And I've know Joel and I know Gino, and I came away from this episode liking them more.
Yes, to piggyback off of what Joseph said in the last episode on this being its most interesting, these shows within the lens of competition. I would say, like, him taking his shirt off, him having some personality, hooks you in. But the most interesting part of this episode are his views and self-doubts and self-deprecation within the context of competition, or who he is as a golfer. Not as, like, also an interesting, maybe good guy, or it seems like a great guy. Does that make sense? Like, I found it, like, I am appreciate that he's not a dial tone. But
no, like, I'm with you.
Okay.
And I loved this episode. It did a lot for me. It made me feel a lot of things. And I think the part where, to go off of what you're saying, Brendan, him talking about losing his mom and then beating a ton of range balls, deciding to become a tour pro because it's the only thing left he could do that was something great. I love that image. I think a lot of people can relate to that, of when you're going through something challenging, going to hit a bunch of range balls as an outlet. And then, like you're saying, within the context of competition, he ends up realizing those goals, becomes a PGA Tour player, and competes in the US Open. So I thought the story arc here was unbelievable. it made me feel a lot of things, and I learned a lot about Joel Dahmen.
My only one critique, and I think we're generally coming down on the positive review, I thought it got a little repetitive with the self-doubt and self-deprecation quotes. It was like in every setting. Like we got it at the beginning. Like Max Homa is like he's self-deprecating, least confident sounding person who's also amazing at golf. And then we get it like in the US Open, we get it at sectionals, we get it at Farmers when he's not playing well. It just felt like, honestly, I'm not even saying it was bad. Like I kind of found it interesting each time. I'd say my only critique of it was that got a little repetitive. Like it was well established that he like sometimes is too down on himself and doesn't have the confidence he should for how good he is.
I kind of take something from episode 2 with Brooks and Scotty Scheffler, and how we talk so much about Scotty Scheffler's wonderful expectation management. And I kind of, over the course of this episode, began to go from, oh, he has self-doubt, to more of the self-doubt is the way he copes with expectations. If he tells himself, well, I'm the 70th best player of the world, it helps him not get disappointed when things don't go his way. It helps him also deal with the, hey, it's the weekend at the US Open. Nobody expected me to be here, and I shouldn't be here. That helps him in a way. That he uses this mentality in order to manage expectations well. He has people around him that do the pumping up. Everybody around him tells him how good he is. He knows this. He knows he's a very good golfer. He just uses his self-deprecation to avoid raising his expectations and struggling to meet those expectations. I think expectation management is something that I take away from this series as vitally important to a professional golfer. And I think that Joel Dahmen shows us a very unique and individual way of dealing with said expectations.
And I would go beyond that too, that I think what it did is it started with, quote, like, I'll never be one of the best players in the world. I'll never compete in majors. There's a lot of self-doubt expressed throughout the episode. And then it ends with him saying, my best golf is very good golf. I can compete with the best golfers in the world. I'm ready to play now. That was fun. After his US Open experience. So I think it kind of took you on the full story arc there. And kind of like Brooks Koepka's saying, you're always one swing away from feeling like you have it back. It kind of left on a Joel Dahmen note, like, I can hang with these guys. So I found it to be an effective tactic of showing what Joel Dahmen's expectations are at the beginning of the episode versus where he is now.
And it's certainly a different approach. Like I love the montage they run after he talks about like, I'm not good enough to win a major. I'm just like, I'm pretty good at golf, and somebody's got to be the 70th best player in the world. They run this montage of Rory, Rahm, Morikawa, of like, I think Rory's quote is like, self-belief is why we're so good. Like the swagger, like I think I'm the absolute best player in the world. And it's like 4 or 5 of those guys.
I think Rahm's like, I think I played a great round of golf today. You know, like,
yes.
So what really worked also about that to me is they showed that, and then they tied it together with one of my favorite scenes in the whole episode is it's either Saturday or Sunday of the US Open. You know, players are emptying out, tee times are getting spaced out, there's less players around, and in the men's locker room at the country club is sitting Jon Rahm, Rory, and Colin Morikawa, who are just sitting there shooting the shit. And then in comes Joel Dahmen. And it's just this, you know, I think that's where that imposter syndrome title works well. It's this guy, you know, and what Joseph said, this mid-tier pro who has elevated his play for a given week where he's around these guys. And that's really the thing. And I think like an effective use was Max Homa in this episode, where, you know, if you know a lot about golf and maybe they're buddies, but Max Homa's on this upward ascent, you know, going from a Joel Dahmen player into a top tier player, and the different mentality at that party. I mean, I just love this. There's so many things that I loved about this episode.
Same. And when we talk about how important belief is, right, and Rory saying the most important thing is self-belief, it did a lot for me when they were reading the email that Gino sent to Joel Dahmen saying, I truly believe you'll be one of the best players in the world. And him saying that he had plans to get rid of his truck and buy a Honda Civic to live out of it because that's how much he believed in Joel Dahmen. Like, everyone needs someone like that in their corner. I thought it was just an unbelievable example to illustrate how the power of believing in yourself and in somebody else to help them achieve their goals without sounding too trite. I thought it was powerful.
I mean, the fact that this guy and his caddy are the subject of basically an entire episode of this glitzy ass Netflix docuseries is kind of a miracle on its own. Like, it's obviously a testament to him being pretty good at golf, right? Better than 99.9%. But it's kind of like, I think he goes, it's your friendly neighbor who also just happens to be really fucking good at hitting a golf ball, is how Gino characterizes him at the start. Like, he's an interesting dude who's amazingly talented. And yet he's like, maybe like the last guy you'd expect. Like, talk about the pool scene with Jenna and Brooks, right? Or JT and Spieth, who've been just these groomed since day one, right? It's just a totally different. The fact that he's the subject of what it seems like we're agreeing is a really good episode of this glitzy Netflix docuseries is sort of a miracle on its own. And it's a testament to the story of being 99.9% better than everybody in the world at something, but maybe not like the best. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with being so freaking good at something, but not necessarily the best?
Some of the scenes that I really loved were that just showed how kind of, in a way, like humble, and I don't want to say simple, but couple things. I love the scene going stroller shopping for a variety of reasons. We've seen guys in cars in this show, and everybody's in Mercedes or fancy ass cars or flying private jets. Joel Dahmen and his wife are driving a Honda SUV. They showed a scene outside his house, which is in Arizona, and it looks like just a normal house. Like
Rambler.
It is a normal, like single family house. It's nothing opulent. Like, this guy lives a very normal life. And even though, as you just said, 99.9% skilled player in an occupation, right? And he's making millions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
But he is so down to earth, and he lives his life he talked about this with the cancer, with his own testicular cancer. He lives his life, very just simply. He doesn't take anything for granted, but and I think those were just some small things that I really enjoyed about it.
Going on the selflessness.
Yep.
One small tidbit that I thought was awesome. It was just a passing line, but when they were on the tee, I believe at the U.S. Open, Gino, his caddy, says to Joel, "Have a great day," and Joel responds, "You too, pal." And it's like, how many player-caddy relationships are like that, where the player's like bringing the caddy in so much? You have a good day too, man. Like, we're in this together. I didn't even think it was cliche. It felt authentic the entire way.
I loved when when Joel's like, I should just get on a flight. I should, and Gino's like, well, there's a 3:00 flight. Like, like that type of banter. And, it's like, I think that one of the big things with the player, like, they have an idyllic player caddy relationship, but
yes, it's a very unique relationship within the already unique like, this one is not,
but
standard.
I still thought that they hit on one of the big strains of a player PGA Tour, a player caddy relationship, of everything's out of the caddy's hands. And this is like, in a way, Joel Dahmen wants, him and Gino are best friends. They made that very clear. Like, he wants the best thing for Gino, but you still get the strain. And Gino says, Joel's capable of being top 30 in the world. I don't know if he wants to be top 30 in the world. And you could sense a little bit of frustration from Gino at that point, because this is the thing about caddies. is they are directly tied, and it's super unique in sports. It's not like a manager. They don't get paid, just based off of they are directly tied to earnings. And if their player isn't performing, they have to deal and shit can be going on in their players' lives. They can know that their player isn't working as hard as they can, and they have to manage that relationship. They can't be out front. And here's Gino, he's doing everything he can to tell and get Joel to believe, going back to that letter, that he is one of the best players in the world. And you could sense there is a tinge of frustration from Gino in this guy just, he doesn't necessarily believe that he's as good as he is. And I think that as great of a relationship as it is, and as great of a relationship, that is something that every caddy on tour goes through, is that they can do everything right, but some of the stuff is out of their control and is dependent on these very fickle athletes that some of them, Joel's kind of an outlier. He's a different breed than a lot of these guys, but that this do no wrong type of attitude that a lot of players have. Nothing's ever their fault. Joel is not that. But with Joel, it's the opposite. He's just trying to get him to believe how good he is.
Well, I think this isn't a simple story. It's not told. They don't simplify things here. The tension between being caught between lacking self-confidence and thinking you could win is displayed here, right? By the end, as Joseph said, the tension between being the simple, it's not he shuns money, right? He says in the episode, money can't buy happiness, but it helps a lot. So they don't just make it reductive, black and white. It's the tension of trying to live and not lose who you are. He's molded by loss and trauma, I think was what his wife said, right? And that has obviously helped him be a little more down to earth and not realize every competition is life and death. But he still wants to make money. He realizes it helps with his life, and he still wants to be better. He wants to think he could compete while also putting himself down. I think there's a lot of it's really told well in terms of kind of drawing out those tensions of being I don't know, containing multitudes, I should say, right? Not just simply having one approach, one resignation, an attitude of being resigned. And so I think that comes out repeatedly throughout the episode. It's not that simple. It's not that simple a character.
I guess a big theme for me through the whole show, this one in particular, it's everyone is motivated for different reasons, right? And it's something I've picked up on a lot, watching a ton of NBA this year. Second night of a back-to-back, you've been traveling, you might have a flat day. It actually happens, right? You have to be motivated to play. I think for Joel, a lot of the motivation comes from, I know what life or death is. This isn't life or death. This is golf. I'm pretty freed up to go play. And I'm really even if I don't believe that I'm one of the best in the world, what's there to lose? And I thought that was an interesting insight versus somebody like Brooks, who feels this self-doubt in a way that doesn't feel like it's moving in a positive direction. So I think seeing the motivation of each figure in this show has been insightful. And it's cool to see Joel's, like Andy's saying, he's motivated. He's keeping the expectations off himself, but when he had to step up, he did step up.
How about I thought he was a perfect U.S. Open story. Perfect introduction to the U.S. Open. Just
and
in the sense,
obviously.
Yeah, because of the sectional qualifier aspect of it, but also I loved, the juxtaposition. It seemed like the other kind of very faint story of the U.S. Open centered around Colin Morikawa. And you want to talk about polar opposites on the PGA Tour. I feel like Dahmen and Morikawa, that was, I think where this show has thrived for me so far is the juxtapositions. And we had a similar one. It was much smaller than the Scotty and Brooks episode, but this one with Morikawa, kind of the golden child of the PGA Tour, instant success, all this with qualifier Joel Dahmen, and they were kind of the two duking it out at the U.S. Open. But obviously the sectional story was great too with the White Claws.
Yeah, that was obviously like a super. Go ahead, Joseph. That was a highlight for me. I mean, I think it speaks to you get to a certain point in your life where you don't you don't have to give as much of a shit. right? And like, you don't have to sweat the small stuff. Like, there used to be a point where, like, when you're young, like when you have that first drink, that means like you're done for the, like, that means you have chosen to drink, and now you're not going to be responsible anymore. And now you are going down a path for that day or that afternoon or that night. And you get older, and like, you can have a drink and still maybe be a productive person or go do something social, or I don't know, you could like hang with your kids. And like, this is just, I don't know. This is my own perspective. He can have a White Claw and still go shoot 65. And it's like, it's at a point in his life where that does not mean necessarily, maybe it's a mechanism, a coping mechanism, or it's bringing him back down, taking the pressure off the second round. But like, it doesn't mean you're totally giving up. That's kind of it's a very, not the main thrust of that scene, but it was amusing. It was obviously it's going to be entertaining for anybody who watches it. It was this guy's competing for the U.S. Open, and he's having a hard seltzer at lunch.
A couple, they say.
Couple, multiples, and then he makes it, of course. So
yeah, and maybe I think I'm
ahead.
being way more sentimental on this episode than
I
normally feel about golf, but this one did make me feel things, and I think one of the things it captured well is the sense of belonging. Like, these guys, a lot of them feel like imposters until they've made it. So to go from sectional qualifying and making it to then playing in the US Open and having the scene of Jon Rahm, Colin Morikawa, and Rory acknowledging that Joel's playing really well, because there's a scene there where they say out loud, like, yeah, he's playing really well. I thought it did a cool job of showing why Joel feels like he belongs. Like, you know what? I can hang with these guys. And I think that's something a lot of players experience. Have I actually made it? Like, am I actually good? Do I belong here? I think it did a good job of capturing that sentiment very well.
That's one of those scenes, and Andy brought it up early. You bring it up again. Just like the three of those guys in the locker room, like, I didn't even need to get anything from that. Like, that was the substance. The scene was the substance. And then, of course, Joel coming in adds another element to the scene of like, this guy sort of, what thresholds are you at? Are you at the point where you can say hi to are you at the point where you can chop it up, or where they approve or they recognize your abilities? And so that scene just existing was something this show, I think, is probably only going to deliver, and we wouldn't get anywhere else. And that's why this show has value.
It also gives you just a great lens into the atmosphere of a major championship. Any big tournament, really. This goes to even like amateur tournaments. Like, when you get late in a championship, one of the really cool aspects of it, if you are a imposter, the tee times get spaced out. Everybody's going off one. It's not like a tour event where you might have threesomes and you might have dual split tees and different things. So there just aren't many people around. And when you're talking about major championships, the people that are around are the who's who of the game. And I think that was it's just such a cool visual. And if anybody's played deep into a bigger amateur event, what I'm talking about here is like the levity and the people around. There's this feeling of, wow, like this is a big deal. I'm at the end and look at who's around. Like, it's kind of a mutual respect that's earned when you get later into these things. And that's that's why this episode to me really works at a level. Is it's this guy who just keeps talking about how he's not that good. But that moment to me is the peak of the episode, is where he's there. He's acknowledged with the rarefied air of the sport. And he's, it's like the full actualization of what everybody's been saying the whole episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear they started. Farmers Insurance Open was, I think, the first tournament they shot at last year. And so they're just starting there with like Joel, the character, and the caddy relationship, right? And hoping they get something. And now all of a sudden they get it, right? But it concludes with that sort of locker room scene, and he's top on the leaderboard, and now they can contrast him with Morikawa. So it really, like, he came through for them in terms of like the storyline. Or else he's just the guy, with the shirt off at Phoenix and with the great caddy relationship and the self-doubt. Like, the US Open, popping at the US Open, really kind of makes this an episode. Other than that, it's probably not. It's probably like a piece of like a contrasting storyline with something else, with maybe Morikawa episode, something like that. So the U.S. Open, it was interesting to hear him sort of contextualize his mindset being in the hunt. He goes, I'm a little more focused than when I'm just screwing around trying to make a paycheck. Like even and playing Sunday at a major when he know he couldn't win anymore and still like grinding, I think was a different was a mindset shift for him as well. He talked about that. Like I think he made a bogey at some hole early in Sunday. He's like, well, I can't win anymore. I know I can't win, but not, I guess, going to the White Claw tent or whatever it is, and just continuing to try to top 10 it or beyond the paycheck, something on the leaderboard that gives him further affirmation and confidence, I thought was interesting in the arc.
And I think now, I hadn't really thought about this until you were talking there, Brendan, but this idea of playing meaningful golf and watching this directly after the Ian Poulter episode where he says, like, I want to play golf that makes a difference and I know I can still do that, versus somebody like Joel Dahmen who doesn't make statements like that, but when he actually went out and played meaningful golf that makes you feel something. And I think it is hitting on the essence of the tour and why it is special to have a deep bench of a lot of guys who can go out and make it happen any week. Joel Dahmen is one of those names, and it's special to see him at the top of the leaderboard. Like, that's meaningful golf.
Anything more on the Gino? I thought it was worthwhile. I'm glad they went to his house and his home and talked about their relationship and their upbringing. Of course, like Joel's background is unique too. Like, what do you say? I never grieved. I just hit it. And that talks about what you said at the beginning about hitting balls. And he has a caddy that sort of understands that background better than anyone. Were you, anything more on that relationship that stuck out to you? I mean, that's a big focus.
I think they could have gone a little bit on like how rare it is for somebody to come out of Eastern Washington,
Sure.
Western Idaho. But I did love Gino going back home. I loved it. Really hit to me on like the team aspect of it, like how those two are really in it together. How the mom was cutting out all of the clippings for the years. Like I really liked that, and I think it just pulled on the aspect of like, who knows what Joel's career looks like without Gino, but it does to me feel like without Gino, I don't know if Joel's there.
Yeah. In the relationship between even Gino and Joel's wife, like it is very tight knit. I was a caddy. I think both of you were caddies, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I were a professional golfer, I'm not sure whether I would work well with a caddy who's a very close friend. Like that can be tenuous. It's almost like going into business with somebody in your family. But
Sure.
The fact that it's working well for them, I think, is a testament to both of their humility and how well that partnership kind of gels.
Is there anything about this episode that didn't really work for you guys that you found? I guess my only thing was it got a little repetitive with the self-doubt along the way, but not overbearing to the point. I honestly, I had always thought like I just felt he was like overcovered a little bit. He was like this darling of social media, which like rightfully so. He's got some personality and he's interesting. But I just found like some of the underlying humanity to the personality, right? The jokes and the down to earth and the having a beer and having a great caddy relationship. Really, like, I'm a huge Joel Dahmen fan after watching this, and count me among everybody else who's kind of maybe had already known this prior to this episode. But anything else that really didn't work for you guys, or you thought was not especially good about this episode?
I thought it was great. I think it's in the running for the best episode I've seen.
Interesting.
I think it's the best. I give it an A+.
Okay. Notes?
I was going to say, I'm pretty confident this is going to be my favorite episode, even though I haven't seen the rest of them. I would give it an A or an A+. If anything doesn't work, sometimes it's the golf shots that aren't always framed like, what does this mean? But yeah. I mean, I'm really nitpicking. I loved this episode, and again, I think it's going to be my favorite one I watch.
at the end, like at the very end, one of the last scenes, it's the end of the U.S. Open. He hugs his wife and he goes, "We didn't lose any money this week." I loved that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Really good.
It's just like complete. It works so well, as you hit on, as a post Poulter. It's like we bathed in this like kind of like icky, just not necessarily like great topic, and then it's like this story right after works really well.
Well, does it make you appreciate that Poulter episode anymore, or no? As if like that was a setup or something. That's why they did it. Okay, I agree. I agree with that. Just
the Poulter episode could have been a lot better. That where that one under delivered. I don't know in the time frame that was, of this Dahmen episode, if it could have been better.
This is supposed to be about the episodes, but putting our golf analyst hat on for a minute, there's at the end they talk about like, feels like this is a big shift for Joel. Like he missed a lot of cuts after this. Like, how good can Joel Dahmen be? Like, what is this like? Is top? Can he win a major? Like, do you feel like this episode or this past season, like, is a fair representation of Joel's peak, of his kind of average? Where's he going? Like, I know that's like we're asking to like put a crystal ball out there, but what are your opinions of Joel Dahmen as the golfer and his future?
My opinion's pretty unchanged. One thing I would say, like the U.S. Open, now we're getting in the weeds a little bit, was like a really pretty hardcore driving accuracy test, and Joel Dahmen's like one of the most accurate drivers in the world. So I think what it illuminates, even though they didn't talk about this in the episode, is how talented everyone on tour is. And when you get a golf course that's suited for you and you're feeling it that week, you can contend. So it doesn't really change, I think, my long-term prospects for Joel Dahmen. He's a really good golfer and he's capable of winning any week.
Yeah, I think Joel Dahmen, and this is obviously, I think it was we aren't talking playing styles in this show, but and this is where I would contend that you're really missing out, because the tennis thing is talking about different playing surfaces, and as Joseph just alluded to, like the playing test that's presented at the U.S. Open. Joel Dahmen is going to be one of the PGA Tour specialists. When you dive into, there are going to be distinct courses that really fit Joel Dahmen's game. And those courses, like on given weeks, he should be considered a top 10, top 15 player, but they have to be the right course fit for his game. Like he's not going to be a great fit at Torrey Pines ever, which is ironically where this episode really started.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Should we do notes? I mean, this is our sort of first exposure to the U.S. Open. I would say did a good job of starting with sectionals and getting into U.S. Open, but the next episode is like the U.S. Open, the final. It's on Fitzpatrick. So, which I found, like, I thought that was the best championship last year. I'm kind of glad it's getting a lot of the run in the multiple episodes. Other notes you have from this outside of the Dahmen and Gino stuff?
How about Gino making $87 in year one?
Astounding.
Thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, just every scene in this episode is really evocative, right? Gino's sitting on his porch, and it's a pretty like Spartan, normal looking porch in Idaho, right? And like Joel in the gym with his wife.
Yeah.
Right? Not like with, a bunch of others, I don't know, or just one-on-one. It's just like, it's like a couple's workout, right? And they're both, and Joel's like struggling, right? Whereas some of these are sort of vanity montages. It's not that for Joel Dahmen.
I liked how he was like, could you give me bigger weights so I look better?
But yeah, just like the $87 thing just made me think of of course they're moving up in the world. It's not like don't have a pot to piss in, but at his mom's house is like a normal looking house. It's very different from Brooks's abode in Jupiter and stuff like that. So
also, like the kids storyline, I thought was like not overdone, but weaved in perfectly. And one of the things that was even better was like He's hitting balls Sunday at the U.S. Open. It's the biggest, obviously, probably the biggest round of golf in his life outside of the one that he won. It's up there in the biggest rounds of his golf in his life. And he's on the range and he's talking about how he told his dad, and his dad's one thing. It's like, oh, your life's going to get harder. Just like, and it's obviously Sunday on the range at the U.S. Open's Father's Day. I thought that was really good. I just, really, yeah, as you said, every scene kind of hit, even like when he's on the putting green with Rory, and Rory says, I can't remember what Rory said, but he goes, I work out too.
Yeah. Talked about hitting a 6-iron or something where Joel would hit a 5 or a 4. I can't remember exactly. Joseph, any other notes from you?
You guys just nailed my main notes. Thought it did an amazing job of introducing people to the importance of sectional qualifying at the U.S. Open, and that anyone can make it to the U.S. Open. I think that's a really special part of the sport that was highlighted. Also, the player-caddy relationship. Thought it did an excellent job of that. Even getting into Gino, like reading some of his putts. Thought that was excellent.
Yeah.
Other note I have, main other thing we haven't really talked about, I'm pretty fascinated by the John Rahm, Rory McIlroy kinship, and the fact that they're eating together, making jokes together. And now, like, fast forwarding to 2023, those are heads and shoulders the two best golfers in the world. And so I think it does add some context to their relationship, as we're about to watch, hopefully, an epic year of those two battling head to head, getting along with each other, kind of carrying the mantle for the tour. It's a pretty cool setup.
On a technical aspect, I'm surprised at how much Rahm appears, given he was like one of the big whales that didn't agree to it. And I understand there are workarounds there with major championship footage, but like he must have agreed to certain parts based on how much.
Maybe he's coming next season. Like, I think that's a discussion at some point, like who you'd want to see the next season. And I think we'll see one of them that is heavily involved in two of the majors, but not really involved at all in the show. In the next episode with Zalatoris, right?
Wait, that's a question. If they do another season, do you guys want to see the same? Right? Do you guys want to see any of the same guys again?
I mean, it depends on how. Probably not. I mean, probably not like Joel Dahmen, to be honest with you. But like if Brooks, or I mean, I want to see Joel Dahmen if he wins or falls off. Like if there's a demonstrative change to his status, sure. But like, so I would say like Brooks, yeah, based on what's happened, based on what happened in his episode.
Do you want to see another Ian Poulter episode?
No. What about you, Joseph? You want to?
No, not really.
Nobody.
Maybe if something eventful happens, yeah. But no, not really. I think what's special is giving context to who somebody like Joel Dahmen is that the casual fan didn't know. So I would rather profile somebody in depth. Like if you do another Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas episode, I don't think I'm going to learn a whole lot more.
That's fair. Other notes, Andy? Are you good?
I'm good.
I would say one thing I like about this in general, this show, which was drawn out, especially in this episode, I wrote it from episode 1, is how they emphasize money made like almost above score, like just in the graphics. And that's like, I forget what Joel made at the US Open. It's like 500 some thousand. Like that's how this casual audience looks at things. Whether the PGA Tour wanted to deny or downplay money prior to 2022 or now they want to play it up. I never know where they stand. They used to want you to talk all about the players purse, then they didn't want you to talk about it. But like that's how the casual audience looks at these things more than score. It's like, wow, he made 540,000 or he made 1.2 million.
I got a funny additional story, I guess, with this. So, it ties in with this episode, but Gino and Derek Smith, who's Denny McCarthy's caddy, who also had a great week at the U.S. Open, came down and played in our event the day after the U.S. Open at Yale. And Gino was obviously just on like cloud 9, after this week. And he was like, he was a late ad. He was like, do you guys have any, he tweeted like, do you have anywhere to play? Is there anywhere we can play? And we're like, and I think Will tweeted like, come out to our event at Yale. So he came and he just like pulled out this fat stack of cash, paid like in cash, because he had clearly just gotten paid out like something, but they were on their way to Travelers. They ended up winning the event, but like those two guys, like it was a cool thing because like they're obviously Denny McCarthy. I would put in the same bucket of player as Joel Dahmen, kind of like your mid-level player that couldn't pop in certain weeks, certain setups, and both of them just had like great weeks, and it was fun interacting with two guys that were so happy, and it just like kind of illuminated like just how much these guys are invested in it in a way. Like they hit on it in the episode. It's like being married in a way, and like those would be like two guys. I guess the way to conceptualize it is like your partner gets a massive raise at work or something, or a new job that's going to give them more time off, way more money, and obviously you benefit from both of them. And like like they just it was cool. It was really a neat experience seeing those guys right after that moment. Like the next day, drove down and just yeah. So
I think McCarthy was the one who brought him the White Claws. He was only in the shot for like a second in Columbus in the sectionals. I think it was McCarthy that came up to this table. Okay.
I guess on the other thing, Brendan.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like your point about them calling out money because that's how the casual fan experiences golf. We'll just add, I don't think we've had a single FedEx Cup mentioned so far, and we are halfway through the series, which maybe is indicative of how much this FedEx Cup system matters to the players.
An admission that
just wait till the Prince.
The Prince of Ponte Vedra? Are you talking about the Rory episode? All right. They're trying to spoil it here as we get ahead. But no, that's a good point. That's a good point, Joe. Or
great point.
What some outside storytellers might think is salient, right? I mean, outside. I know they have the contract, or they have there's some people at the tour involved, but Netflix and this production company aren't the tour, and they're not prioritizing or even acknowledging FedEx Cup. Good point.
Because honestly, most people don't care.
Good point. All right, that does it for episode 4 of Full Swing Thoughts. We'll be back with episode 5. Thanks for you guys listening.